She hid her fever to keep her job, but the letter in her bag shocked the billionaire. The crystal chandelier above the grand foyer blurred in and out of focus as Maya steadied herself against the marble pillar. Her hands trembled as she clutched the feather duster, willing her body to obey just a few more hours. The fever had started 3 days ago, a whisper of heat that had grown into a roaring fire beneath her skin. But she couldn't stop. Not today. Not ever. At 27, Maya had learned that survival meant silence. It meant swallowing pain like bitter medicine and painting smiles over exhaustion. Her daughter, Sophie, was only 5 years old, and the medical bills from her recent pneumonia still sat unpaid on their tiny kitchen table. This job at the Harrison estate was the only thing standing between them and eviction, between warm meals and empty stomachs. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, her footsteps eerily quiet on floors she'd polished 1,000 times. Each room was a masterpiece of wealth, imported rugs from Persia, paintings worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, furniture carved from woods she couldn't even pronounce. She cleaned them all with reverent care, as if touching someone else's dream could somehow make hers feel less impossible. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Maya paused to catch her breath. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, with lips drained of color. She touched her forehead and felt the scorching heat. 103 degrees, maybe higher. She'd stopped checking the thermometer yesterday when it climbed past 102. Just finished today, she whispered to herself. Just make it through today. But today was different. Today, she carried a secret heavier than her fever. In her bag, folded carefully between her daughter's crayon drawing and an overdue electric bill, was a resignation letter. She'd written it last night while Sophie slept, tears smudging the ink as she tried to find words for the impossible choice she was making. She couldn't afford to be sick and keep this job. And she couldn't afford to keep this job while being this sick. It was a cruel mathematics with no right answer. The grand staircase loomed before her, 42 steps she'd counted countless times. Today, each one felt like a mountain. She gripped the mahogany banister and began to climb, her legs shaking with effort. Halfway up, the world tilted sideways. She grabbed the railing with both hands, her knuckles white, breathing through the wave of dizziness. You can do this, she told herself. For Sophie. You can do anything for Sophie. The second floor was where Mr. Harrison's private study resided, along with his bedroom suite and a library that smelled of leather and old paper. She'd always loved this floor. It was quieter, more intimate than the showpiece rooms downstairs. Here, she could almost forget she was just the help. Alexander Harrison was 34, though he carried himself with the weariness of someone much older. In the 2 years Maya had worked here, she'd learned to read his moods by the set of his shoulders, the way he held his coffee cup, the silence that followed him through empty rooms. He was kind, in a distant sort of way, always polite, never cruel, but wrapped in the isolation that extreme wealth seemed to require. She'd seen him smile maybe 3 times. Once when his niece visited and ran shrieking with laughter through the halls. Once when he closed a business deal that apparently saved hundreds of jobs. And once, inexplicably, when he caught Maya singing softly to herself while arranging flowers in the morning room. Today, she heard his footsteps in the study, the distinctive rhythm of his Italian leather shoes on hardwood. She should announce herself, ask if he needed anything, perform the invisible dance of service. But speaking felt like too much effort. Instead, she began dusting the hall table, moving with mechanical precision. The study door opened. She didn't look up, focusing on a porcelain vase that probably cost more than her car. Maya. His voice was quiet, concerned. Are you all right? Yes, sir. Perfectly fine. The lie tasted like ash, but she'd become fluent in this language of necessary deception. She felt his gaze on her, observant, analytical. Alexander Harrison hadn't built a tech empire by missing details. But she kept her head down, kept moving, kept the performance going. You look pale. Just tired, sir. I apologize. It won't affect my work. There was a pause, heavy with something she couldn't name. Then his footsteps retreated back into the study. Maya exhaled slowly, her chest aching. She'd survived the interaction. That was enough. The hours crawled by like wounded things. She cleaned 3 guest bathrooms, polished silver in the dining room, and vacuumed the library with meticulous care. Every task took twice as long as usual. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and she had to keep pausing to lean against walls, to close her eyes and wait for the spinning to stop. At 2 o'clock, she was supposed to prepare Mr. Harrison's afternoon coffee, a simple espresso, no sugar, served in the Italian cup his grandmother had given him. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the espresso machine as if it were a complex puzzle she'd never solved before. The cup rattled against the saucer as she carried it to his study. She knocked softly, waited for his acknowledgement, then entered. He was at his desk, surrounded by multiple monitors, his fingers flying across a keyboard. The late afternoon light caught the silver threading through his dark hair. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression shifted. Maya set the cup down carefully, but her hand betrayed her. The saucer clinked too loudly, and a drop of espresso sloshed onto the walnut desk. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clean it immediately." "Maya." His voice cut through her panic. "Sit down." "Sir, I can't." That wasn't a request. His tone was gentle but firm. "Sit. Please." Her legs gave out before she could argue, and she sank into the leather chair across from him. The room swayed slightly. Alexander Harrison closed his laptop and studied the woman sitting across from him with an intensity that made Maya want to disappear into the chair's leather depths. She'd always thought his eyes were gray, but up close they held flecks of blue, like storm clouds breaking apart. Right now, those eyes were filled with something that looked dangerously close to worry. "How long have you been sick?" he asked quietly. "I'm not, Maya." He said her name like a period at the end of a sentence, final and unmovable. "Please don't insult my intelligence. You've been moving like every step costs you something for 3 days now. This morning, you took 15 minutes to climb the main staircase. Yesterday, I found you gripping the doorframe in the library like you'd fall without it." Heat flooded her face, whether from fever or embarrassment. She couldn't tell. "I didn't realize you'd noticed, sir. I apologize for my inefficiency." Inefficiency. Something like frustration crossed his features. "Is that really what you think I'm concerned about?" He stood and walked around the desk, and Maya instinctively tried to rise, to maintain the proper distance between employer and employee. His hand on her shoulder stopped her, gentle but insistent. "Stay seated, please." He crouched beside the chair so they were at eye level, and the unexpectedness of it made Maya's breath catch. Billionaires didn't crouch. They didn't make themselves smaller to meet your gaze. They towered and commanded, and kept their distance. "I'm going to check your temperature," he said, already reaching for his phone. "And before you protest, understand that I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you of what's about to happen." The thermometer arrived within minutes. Apparently, he'd had his assistant order it with priority delivery. The same efficiency that built his empire now focused on her fever. Maya wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but she was too tired. "Under your tongue," he instructed, and she obeyed, because what else could she do? When it beeped, he looked at the reading and his jaw tightened. 104.2, Jesus, Maya. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the careful styling. "You need to be in a hospital, not polishing my silver." "No hospitals." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I can't afford. The bills from Sophie's pneumonia are already." She stopped, realizing she'd said too much. "Sophie." His voice softened impossibly. "Your daughter?" Maya nodded, fighting the tears that suddenly burned behind her eyes. She never cried. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, a release that might break the dam holding everything together. "She's 5. She was sick last month. The antibiotics, the emergency room visit, the follow-up appointments." Her voice cracked. "I'm still paying those bills. I can't add more debt. I just need to work through this. I've done it before." Alexander stood abruptly and Maya flinched, expecting anger or dismissal. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Martinez? Alex Harrison. I need you at my home immediately. No, it's not for me. One of my employees. High fever, has been working sick for at least 3 days. Yes, I'll send a car. He paused, listening. I don't care what you have scheduled. Reschedule it. This is urgent. He hung up and turned to Maya, whose eyes had gone wide. Sir, you can't. I don't need a private doctor. I'll be fine with some rest, and… You're going home right now, he said firmly. Where do you live? Mr. Harrison, please. Address, Maya. Now. Something in his tone, not harsh, but immovable as bedrock, made her whisper. Oak Street Apartments. Building C, Unit 412. He nodded and made another call. James, bring the car around. We're taking Maya home. Another pause. No, I'm driving. Just get the car. You can't drive me home, Maya protested, finally finding her voice. Sir, it's not appropriate. I can take the bus. In your condition? Absolutely not. He was already gathering his keys, his wallet. Who's watching Sophie right now? Mrs. Chun, my neighbor. She watches her after kindergarten until I get home at 6. Call her. Tell her you'll be late. He waited, arms crossed, until Maya pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. The conversation with Mrs. Chun was brief and confusing. How did she explain that her billionaire boss was personally driving her home? She settled for, I'm not feeling well, and Mr. Harrison is kindly giving me a ride. Mrs. Chen's shocked silence spoke volumes. The Mercedes sedan was warm and smelled of leather and subtle cologne. Maya sank into the passenger seat, her body finally acknowledging just how close to collapse she'd been. The seat heater came on automatically, and she couldn't suppress a small sigh of relief. Alexander drove with the same confident precision he brought to everything else. They rode in silence for several minutes before he spoke. 2 years you've worked for me. Have I ever been unfair to you? The question surprised her. No, sir. You've always been kind. Then why didn't you tell me you were sick? Why did you think you had to hide it? Maya stared out the window at the passing city, gleaming skyscrapers giving way to modest neighborhoods, wealth bleeding into struggle in the space of a few miles. How could she explain the fear that governed her life? The knowledge that she was replaceable, that showing weakness meant losing everything? Because people like me don't get sick days, she finally said. We don't get second chances. There are 100 women who would take my job tomorrow if I showed any sign I couldn't handle it. I have Sophie to think about. I can't risk, her voice broke. People like you? His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You mean people who work hard? People who show up every day and take pride in their work? People who care for their children despite impossible circumstances. He pulled to a stop at a red light and turned to face her fully. Maya, you're one of the most reliable employees I've ever had. You treat my home with more care than I do. You remember details I forget, that I like my coffee at exactly 2 o'clock, that I prefer the library curtains drawn in the afternoon, that I hate the smell of lavender air freshener. You make an empty house feel less lonely. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. Did you really think I'd fire you for being human? The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Maya's apartment building was a stark contrast to the Harrison estate, a weathered brick structure with rusted fire escapes and windows patched with duct tape. Alexander pulled into a visitor spot, his Mercedes looking absurdly out of place among the beaten-up sedans and trucks held together by prayer and determination. You don't have to walk me up, Maya said quickly, already reaching for the door handle. I can manage from here. I'm sure you can, he replied, already out of the car. But you're not going to. The elevator was broken, of course it was, so they climbed 4 flights of stairs. Alexander watched Maya grip the railing with white knuckles, taking each step like it required negotiation with her body. He stayed close behind, ready to catch her if she fell, though he suspected she'd rather collapse than accept help. The hallway smelled of cooking spices and old carpet. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby, mixing with the sound of a television turned too loud. Maya fumbled with her keys, and Alexander gently took them from her shaking hands, unlocking the door himself. The apartment was tiny, maybe 600 square feet total, but meticulously clean. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A small couch faced a television that had seen better days. Books were stacked neatly on shelves made from cinder blocks and plywood. Everything was worn but cared for, loved despite its limitations. "Sophie's not home yet," Maya said unnecessarily, swaying slightly. "Mrs. Chin picks her up from kindergarten at 3. Where's your bedroom?" She pointed to a door barely ajar, and he guided her toward it with a hand on her elbow. The room was even smaller, just enough space for a full-sized bed, a dresser, and a small closet. Through another door, he glimpsed a second bedroom, this one painted lavender with stars on the ceiling and stuffed animals arranged on a child's bed. "Lie down," he instructed, pulling back the covers. "Dr. Martinez will be here soon." Maya sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "My bag," she said suddenly. "I left it in your car. I'll get it. Just rest." He returned to find her exactly where he'd left her, sitting upright, as if lying down would be surrender. The bag was canvas, worn soft with use, and heavier than expected. He brought it to her, and something in her expression shifted, panic mixed with resignation. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. "You should go." "Really? The doctor can let himself in when he arrives." Alexander studied her pale face, the fever-bright eyes, the way she held that bag like it contained something precious or damning. An instinct he'd honed in countless boardrooms told him there was something she wasn't saying. "What aren't you telling me, Maya?" "Nothing, sir. I need to change and rest." He should leave. Should respect her privacy and go wait in his car for Dr. Martinez. But something stopped him, the same intuition that had saved his company from bad deals and warned him when people were hiding something important. "I'm going to make you some tea," he said instead. "Where do you keep it?" "You don't have to. Humor me." In the kitchen, he found an electric kettle and a box of generic tea bags. While the water heated, his eyes wandered to the papers on the small table, bills marked "Final Notice" in angry red letters. St. Mary's Hospital. Past due amount, $3,847. An eviction warning dated 2 weeks ago. An electricity bill threatening disconnection. Each paper was a small catastrophe, and together they painted a picture of someone drowning quietly, maintaining a perfect surface while the water rose steadily overhead. The kettle clicked off. Alexander made the tea, then stood in the doorway of her bedroom. Maya had finally laid down, but her arms were wrapped around that bag, and her eyes tracked his every movement with something like fear. "Maya," he said gently, setting the tea on her nightstand. "What's in the bag that has you so worried?" "Nothing. Just personal items." "Show me." "Sir, please. If I'm overstepping, tell me directly and I'll leave. But my instinct says there's something you need to tell me, and you're terrified to say it." He pulled the small desk chair closer to her bed and sat, making himself less imposing. "Whatever it is, it's not going to make me angry. I promise you that." The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Then Maya's eyes filled with tears again, and she slowly reached into the bag. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, notebook paper, the kind Sophie probably used for homework, and handed it to him with shaking fingers. "I was going to leave it on your desk tomorrow morning," she whispered. "Before I left." Alexander unfolded the letter. The handwriting was careful, each word chosen with precision. "Dear Mr. Harrison, I am writing to inform you of my resignation, effective immediately. I apologize for the lack of 2 weeks' notice, but circumstances have made it impossible for me to continue in my position. I cannot afford to be sick and keep this job, and I cannot afford to keep this job while being this sick. Today was meant to be my last working day. I have pushed myself as far as I can, but I am no longer able to maintain the standards you deserve. Thank you for your kindness over these 2 years. You have been a fair and generous employer. I wish I could have given you better service in the end. Respectfully, Maya Torres." Alexander read it twice, then looked up at Maya's pale, tear-stained face. "You are going to quit because you got sick?" I can't do the job properly when I'm like this, she said, her voice breaking. You deserve better than someone who needs to lean against walls to stay upright. Someone who takes 15 minutes to climb your stairs. I was slowing down, making mistakes. The coffee this afternoon was the third time I've spilled something this week. So, your solution was to quit? To lose your income entirely rather than ask for a few days to recover? You don't understand. Then help me understand. His voice was gentle but insistent. Because from where I'm sitting, you were about to throw away a job you obviously need, that you work incredibly hard at because you got the flu. It's not just the flu. The words burst out of her. It's everything. The bills I can't pay, the landlord who wants to evict us, Sophie's medical debt, the bus that broke down twice last week, making me late. It's being one disaster away from losing everything every single day. Maya's words hung in the air like smoke, and she looked as shocked as Alexander felt, not at the confession itself, but at the raw desperation in her voice. She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd clearly been holding back for far too long. Alexander sat frozen for a moment, the resignation letter still in his hands. He'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers, faced down hostile boardrooms, rebuilt his company from near bankruptcy after his father's death. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of this proud, dignified woman finally breaking under the weight of impossible choices. He set the letter aside and did something he rarely did. He acted on impulse rather than calculation. He moved to sit on the edge of her bed and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maya, look at me. Please. She lowered her hand slowly, her face blotchy and wet. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. This isn't professional. To hell with professional, he said, surprising them both. You're sick, you're overwhelmed, and you are about to walk away from the one stable thing in your life because you thought it was the noble thing to do. That's not unprofessional. That's just heartbreaking. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened his banking app before he could talk himself out of what he was about to do. What's your full name? Maya what? Torres. Maya Elizabeth Torres. Why? His fingers moved across the screen with decisive taps. And you're paid bi-weekly, correct? Last paycheck was a week ago. Yes, but I don't understand. You will in about 30 seconds. He entered the amount, her full monthly salary, and hit transfer. Check your phone. Maya reached for her phone on the nightstand with trembling hands. The notification lit up her screen, and her face went absolutely white. That's, Mr. Harrison, you transferred $5,000 to my account. Your salary for the month. In advance. But I can't accept. I didn't earn. You've earned every penny and more. He stood and paced to the window, looking out at the parking lot below because looking at her tears made his chest ache in unfamiliar ways. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Maya? I see someone who shows up every single day, who takes pride in work that most people consider beneath them, who remembers that my grandmother's Italian coffee cup means something to me, who arranges flowers in the morning room because I like to have coffee there on Sundays, even though that's not in your job description. He turned back to face her. I see someone who sang to herself while working because you found joy even in dusting. Someone who got sick, seriously sick, and still came to work because your daughter needed you to. That's not someone I want to lose. That's someone I should have been taking better care of all along. I'm just your maid, Maya whispered.
No.
The word came out sharper than he intended. You're not just anything. You're a mother doing everything in your power to give your child a good life. You're someone who fell through every crack in a system that's supposed to help people like you. He paused, searching for the right words. You're someone I should have seen sooner. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Martinez had arrived, a silver-haired man in his 60s carrying a leather medical bag that had probably made house calls since before Maya was born. Alex, he greeted, then turned to Maya with kind eyes. And, you must be my patient. I'm Dr. Martinez. Let's see what we're dealing with, shall we? Alexander stepped out to give them privacy, finding himself in the small living room surrounded by evidence of Maya's life. More of Sophie's artwork, crayon drawings of stick figures holding hands, a house with a crooked chimney, a sun with a smiling face. A small bookshelf held worn children's books and a few adult novels, their spines cracked from multiple readings. On the coffee table, a photo in a discount store frame showed Maya and a little girl with the same dark eyes and bright smile, both covered in what looked like flour, laughing at something off-camera. This was what Maya was fighting for. Not survival in abstract terms, but this specific life. Bedtime stories and baking disasters, crayon masterpieces, and secondhand books loved into softness. Dr. Martinez emerged 20 minutes later, his expression serious. Influenza A, likely complicated by exhaustion and stress. Her immune system is compromised. She needs complete bed rest for at least a week, plenty of fluids, and these medications. He handed Alexander several prescriptions. I've given her an injection to bring the fever down, but she's going to need monitoring. Is there someone who can stay with her? I'll arrange it, Alexander said. She mentioned a daughter. The child should probably stay elsewhere for a few days to avoid infection. Alexander nodded, his mind already working through logistics. I'll handle it. After Dr. Martinez left, Alexander returned to find Maya sitting up slightly, looking more alert but utterly defeated. He said, Sophie can't stay here. Mrs. Chun is 73. I can't ask her to take Sophie for a week. And there's no one else. My family is in Arizona, and we haven't spoken since. She stopped. There's no one. Then Sophie stays with me, Alexander said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Maya's eyes went wide.
What? No.
Absolutely not. You can't. I have a 7-bedroom house with a full staff. One of my housekeepers, Margaret, raised 4 children of her own. Sophie will be safe, well-fed, and entertained while you recover. Mr. Harrison. Alexander, he interrupted. If we're going to argue about me taking care of your daughter, you should at least use my first name. Alexander. She tried, the name strange on her tongue. You're asking me to leave my 5-year-old daughter with a stranger. You have to understand I can't. I'm not a stranger. I'm your employer, who should have noticed sooner that you were struggling. Let me help, Maya. Please. He sat down in the chair again, leaning forward. You can't take care of Sophie if you collapse. And you will collapse if you try to push through this alone. I've seen it happen, people who refuse help until they have no choice left. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle everything herself the way she always had. But the truth was she couldn't. The fever still blazed through her body despite the injection. Her limbs felt like lead, and the thought of caring for Sophie's boundless 5-year-old energy made her want to weep. Just for a few days, she finally whispered, until I can stand without the room spinning. Alexander's relief was visible. I'll bring her back here to pack a bag. What time does Mrs. Chin bring her home? Usually around 5:30. Maya glanced at the clock. It was barely 4. But you don't have to. I can call Mrs. Chun. Have her bring Sophie by your house. Maya. He said her name with a quiet firmness that stopped her protests. Let me do this. Let me help. After he left, Maya lay in the dim afternoon light of her bedroom, trying to process everything that had happened. $5,000 in her bank account. Her resignation letter unaccepted. Her daughter about to stay in a mansion. None of it felt real. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, voices filtered through the walls, Sophie's bright chatter, and a deeper rumble she recognized as Alexander's voice. She tried to sit up, to make herself presentable, but her body refused to cooperate. The door opened softly and Sophie burst in, her backpack bouncing. Mama. Mrs. Chin said you're sick and Mr. Harrison drove her here in his fancy car and she stopped, her excitement fading as she took in Maya's pale face. Mama, you look really sick. I'm okay, baby. Just tired. Maya opened her arms and Sophie climbed carefully onto the bed, snuggling against her side with the careful gentleness of a child who understood fragility. Alexander stood in the doorway, giving them space. Maya met his eyes over Sophie's head, mouthing a silent thank you. Sophie, Maya said gently, you know how sometimes when people are very sick, we have to be extra careful so others don't get sick too? Sophie nodded seriously, her small face concerned. Mr. Harrison has very kindly offered to let you stay at his house for a few days. Just until Mama feels better. Would that be okay? Sophie's eyes went wide. The big house where you work? With all the rooms? Despite everything, Maya smiled. Yes, that house. Will there be other kids to play with? Alexander stepped forward. No other children, I'm afraid. But I do have a library with lots of books, and Margaret, she helps take care of the house, makes the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever tasted. And there's a garden with a fountain where birds come to drink water. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of someone weighing a major decision. Can I bring Mr. Whiskers? She held up a battered stuffed cat, its fur matted from years of love. Of course, Alexander said. Mr. Whiskers is welcome too. They packed Sophie's bag together, Alexander following Maya's whispered instructions about which pajamas, which books, the special cup Sophie preferred for milk. He handled each item with surprising care, folding the small clothes precisely, making sure the nightlight that Sophie couldn't sleep without was wrapped safely in a sweater. You're good at this, Maya observed, watching him zip the bag with methodical attention. My niece visits sometimes, he said. Emma's 7. She taught me that there's a right way and a wrong way to pack a stuffed animal. He smiled slightly. Apparently head first is traumatic. Sophie giggled, warming to him. Mr. Whiskers likes to see where he's going. Then we'll make sure he has a good view. Before they left, Sophie hugged Maya tightly, whispering, Get better, Mama. I love you to the moon. And back again, baby. Always. Maya watched them go, her tiny daughter's hand swallowed by Alexander's larger one, chattering about a picture she'd drawn in school, and felt tears slide down her temples. She should be terrified, sending Sophie off with her employer. Instead, she felt something she rarely allowed herself: hope. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of fever dreams and forced medication. Mrs. Chen checked on her twice daily, bringing soup and worried clucks in Mandarin that Maya had learned meant affection. But it was the evening calls from Alexander that became her anchor to the world beyond her sick bed. She had spaghetti for dinner and got sauce everywhere, he reported on the first night, his tone somewhere between bemused and fond. Margaret says it's a sign of a meal well enjoyed. Then she insisted on giving me a makeover, which apparently involves every clip and ribbon she packed. Maya could picture it, her serious billionaire boss sitting patiently while Sophie decorated his hair with butterfly clips. You didn't have to let her. I have a board meeting via video tomorrow. I'm considering keeping one of the ribbons in, just to see their faces. She laughed, which turned into coughing, which made him immediately concerned. Are you taking the medication? Drinking enough water? Yes, Dr. Harrison. I'm serious, Maya. Dr. Martinez said. I know what he said. I'm following instructions. She paused. How is she really? Is she scared? Does she miss me too much? She misses you, he said honestly. But she's okay. She told Margaret about your baking disasters. Apparently, there was an incident with brownies and the smoke alarm. We may have gotten distracted watching a movie, Maya admitted. She wants to recreate it when you're better. She's very specific about the importance of burning them exactly the right amount. The second night, Alexander called earlier. Question: what's the protocol when a 5-year-old asks why you live in such a big house all by yourself? Maya's heart clenched. What did you tell her? The truth. That sometimes people have big spaces because they're not sure how to fill them with the things that matter. His voice softened. She said you fill your small apartment with love, and that's better than furniture. She said that. She's a wise kid. Wonder where she gets it. On the third day, Maya woke feeling almost human. The fever had broken during the night, leaving her weak but clear-headed. She showered for the first time in days, changed into clean clothes, and actually felt hungry. When Alexander arrived that afternoon to check on her, Maya was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, her hair still damp from the shower. He stopped in the doorway, relief washing over his features. You look better, he said, and the genuine warmth in his voice made something flutter in Maya's chest that had nothing to do with fever. I feel human again. She gestured to the spot beside her. Sit, please. You've been standing in doorways for 3 days like you're afraid to come fully inside my life. He sat, leaving a respectful distance between them, but his presence filled the small room in a way that had nothing to do with his size. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya turned to face him. "Why did you do all this?" she asked quietly. "The money, taking Sophie, the doctor, you didn't have to. I'm just. If you say just your maid again, I'm going to have Margaret ban you from the kitchen," he interrupted, but his tone was gentle. "Maya, can I tell you something? I've been alone in that house for 3 years. Since my father died, and I took over the company. Do you know how many people actually see me in there? Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as vulnerability. "You did. You noticed that I prefer the Italian cup because my grandmother gave it to me, not because it's expensive. You sang while you worked because you brought joy into spaces that haven't heard laughter in years. And when I heard you were sick, working yourself to collapse because you were too afraid to show weakness." He paused. It was like looking in a mirror. Maya's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I lost my mother when I was 12. Cancer. My father threw himself into work, and I learned that lesson well. Pain is something you push through. Weakness is something you hide. Asking for help is admitting defeat." He met her eyes. "I built an empire on that principle. And I've been lonely every single day of it. Alexander. These 3 days, with Sophie in the house." His voice grew thick. Margaret humming in the kitchen while making cookies. Sophie's laughter echoing in rooms that have been silent for too long. "Your daughter teaching me that it's okay to be silly, that wearing butterfly clips to a board meeting might actually be exactly what I needed." He smiled sadly. "She showed me what I've been missing." Maya reached out and took his hand without thinking, her smaller fingers threading through his. "You could have all of that. A family. Children. You're young, successful, kind." "I haven't known how to let anyone in," he admitted, "until a stubborn woman showed me that strength isn't about going it alone. It's about having the courage to accept help when you need it." He squeezed her hand gently. "You taught me that, Maya." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks, but these were different from the desperate sobs of 3 days ago. These felt like release, like possibility. "I don't know how to be anything other than on my own," she whispered. "Since Sophie's father left when I was pregnant, since my family cut me off for keeping her, I've had to be everything: mother, father, provider, protector. I don't know how to share that burden." "Then we'll learn together." Alexander shifted closer. "I know this is complicated. I'm your employer, there are power dynamics, and we barely know each other outside of espresso preferences and cleaning schedules. But I also know that I haven't felt this alive in years. Sophie asked me this morning if you were going to come back to work, and when I said yes, she asked if that meant we'd all still have breakfast together." "Breakfast together?" Maya's voice caught. "She's had breakfast with me and Margaret every morning. Pancakes shaped like animals. She insists I need to learn to make the elephant properly. Apparently my trunk needs work." He smiled. "The house doesn't feel empty anymore, Maya. And I don't want it to be empty again." "What are you saying?" Alexander took a breath, as if preparing for the most important negotiation of his life. "I'm saying let me tear up that resignation letter officially. Let me triple your salary so you never have to choose between your health and Sophie's well-being. Let me put you both in the guest house. It's sitting empty anyway, 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and Sophie could have a yard to play in." "Alexander, that's too much. Let me finish." His thumb traced circles on her hand. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are. I'm not asking you to suddenly see me as anything more than an employer who finally woke up and realized he had something precious in his house all along. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to see if this," he gestured between them, "could be something more than 2 lonely people orbiting each other in a big, empty house." Maya's mind raced. Every practical instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that mixing gratitude with something deeper was a recipe for heartbreak. But she thought about Sophie's laughter echoing through rooms that needed it. About Alexander, sitting patiently while a 5-year-old decorated his hair. About someone finally choosing her health over her labor, her humanity over her usefulness. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of needing you. Of Sophie getting attached. Of this all disappearing." "I'm terrified," he countered. of doing this wrong, of the power dynamic, of hurting you or Sophie, of losing what I've just found. He brought her hand to his chest, where she could feel his heart racing. But I'm more scared of not trying, of going back to that empty house and pretending I don't know what it could be filled with. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. Then she thought of Sophie, asking if they'd still have breakfast together, of Margaret's cookies and butterfly clips, and the simple radical act of being cared for. Okay, she whispered. We try.
Slowly.
Carefully. Slowly, he agreed. Carefully. But Alexander? She opened her eyes and met his gaze directly. I'm not moving into the guest house as your employee. If we do this, if Sophie and I come to live there, it's as equals. As people building something together. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. As equals, he promised. As family. 3 months later. Sophie shrieked with laughter as she chased Margaret's cat through the garden, Mr. Whiskers tucked securely under one arm. Maya watched from the kitchen window of the guest house, now truly home, while Alexander attempted to make elephant pancakes at the stove beside her. The trunk is still wonky, he muttered, concentrating with the same intensity he brought to board meetings. It's perfect, Maya said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Everything is perfect. He turned in her embrace, flour dusting his expensive shirt, and kissed her forehead. Not perfect, but real. And ours. Outside, Sophie's laughter mixed with birdsong. Inside, pancakes burned slightly on the stove. Their new tradition, Maya learned, involved a little bit of disaster. And in the spaces between them, in the quiet moments and the loud ones, 2 lonely people discovered that home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built together, one careful choice at a time, with patience and hope and the radical courage to let yourself be seen.